My name is Zoe Reyes, and the moment I turned my key in the lock of my beachfront mansion and found it wouldn't work, I knew something was terribly wrong. When I peered through the window, I saw my sister Elena lounging on my custom Italian sofa, her husband sprawled across my dining table, and their three kids running wild through rooms I'd spent 2 years carefully designing. They'd changed the locks on my own house. Have you ever felt the exact moment your heart breaks and your rage ignites at the same time? Let me back up, because this story doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with love, trust, and the kind of family loyalty that makes you blind to warning signs you should have seen coming. Elena and I grew up in a cramped two-bedroom apartment in East LA with our single mother, who worked double shifts at a hospital just to keep us fed. We shared everything: clothes, dreams, secrets whispered late at night when the sirens outside got too loud. I was the older sister by 4 years, and I took that role seriously. When mom got sick during my senior year of college, I dropped out to work full time so Elena could finish high school without worry. When she wanted to go to community college, I paid her tuition from my salary as a legal assistant. When she met Marco and wanted a dream wedding she couldn't afford, I took out a loan to make it happen. I told myself it was investment in family, that we were a team, that the sacrifices I made would come back around somehow, some way. After mom passed when I was 28, Elena was all I had left. She promised me we'd always look out for each other. That blood meant everything, that she'd never forget what I'd done for her. I believed every word. I had to believe it, because believing it meant I wasn't alone in the world. For the next decade, I rebuilt my life from scratch. I went back to school at night, finished my degree, and clawed my way into a position at a commercial real estate firm. I was good at it, better than good. I had an eye for undervalued properties and the persistence to close deals others walked away from. I worked 70-hour weeks, skipped vacations, lived in a studio apartment with furniture from thrift stores, and saved every penny I didn't absolutely need to spend. By the time I turned 38, I'd made it. I'd closed a massive deal on a commercial development that earned me a six-figure commission, and combined with my savings and smart investments, I finally had enough for the down payment on something I'd dreamed about since childhood: a home by the ocean. The house was everything I'd imagined: a three-bedroom Spanish-style villa in Malibu with terracotta tiles, arched doorways, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Pacific like living artwork. It had a small infinity pool, a garden with bougainvillea climbing the walls, and a master bedroom where I could fall asleep to the sound of waves. It cost me $520,000, and every single penny of it was mine, earned, deserved, sacred. I closed escrow on a Friday in March, and that weekend I invited Elena and her family over to celebrate. We drank champagne on the deck, watched the kids play in the pool, and as the sun set over the water, Elena hugged me tight and whispered, "You deserve this, Zoe. After everything you've done, everything you've sacrificed, you deserve every bit of happiness." I actually cried. I thought it was the beginning of a new chapter where, finally, I got to live for myself. 3 months later, I got an opportunity I couldn't refuse. A property developer I'd worked with in California was opening a new office in Singapore and wanted me to lead their acquisitions team in Southeast Asia. It was a 2-year contract with a salary that would set me up for life, plus housing and expenses covered. The kind of opportunity that comes once in a career. But it meant leaving my house empty. Elena's family was struggling. Marco had been laid off from his construction job, and they were crammed into a rental apartment with mold problems and a landlord who ignored their complaints. When Elena asked if she could stay in my house while I was gone, just to look after it, keep it maintained, make sure nothing went wrong, it seemed like the perfect solution. I could help my sister when she needed it, and my house wouldn't sit empty and vulnerable. "Are you sure?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. "It would just be temporary, until Marco finds work again. We take such good care of it, Zoe, like it was our own." "Your family?" I told her. "Of course I'm sure." I had a lawyer draw up a simple caretaker agreement. Elena and Marco could live there rent-free in exchange for maintaining the property, paying utilities, and keeping everything in good condition. The agreement specified it was temporary, that they'd vacate within 30 days of my return, and that the house remained solely in my name. Elena signed it without even reading it carefully, laughing about how formal I was being. "It's just us," she said. "We don't need all this legal stuff between sisters." But I insisted. Something in my gut told me to protect myself, even though I felt guilty for the thought. Singapore was extraordinary. I threw myself into work, closed deals across Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, and built a reputation that exceeded even my own expectations. I video called Elena every few weeks. She always answered from my living room, giving me tours to show how well they were maintaining everything. The house looked perfect. She seemed grateful, constantly thanking me for saving her family. I felt good about my decision. I felt like I'd finally reached a place where I could be successful and generous at the same time. Then my contract was extended. Another year with an even better compensation package. I called Elena to let her know, expecting maybe some disappointment, but understanding. Instead, she was enthusiastic. "That's amazing. Zoe, don't worry about anything here. We've got everything under control. The house is perfect. You just focus on your career." Something in her voice felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. I told myself I was being paranoid. During my third year away, the calls became less frequent. Elena was always busy when I tried to reach her, responding to my messages hours or sometimes days later. When we did talk, she was vague about the house, changing subjects quickly. I started to worry, but every time I brought up getting a friend to check on the property, Elena insisted everything was fine and that I was being controlling. "Do you not trust me?" she asked, hurt creeping into her voice. "After everything we've been to each other?" The guilt worked. I backed off. Then one day I got an email from my property insurance company. They were canceling my policy due to undisclosed permanent residence and unauthorized modifications to the property structure. When I called them, confused and alarmed, they told me that someone had converted my garage into a bedroom and that the property was listed as a primary residence for 4 adults and 3 children. 4 adults, not 2. I tried calling Elena immediately. She didn't answer. I tried Marco. Nothing. I sent texts, emails, left voicemails. Radio silence. That's when I made the decision to come home early. I didn't tell anyone. I booked a flight, landed at LAX on a Tuesday morning, rented a car, and drove straight to Malibu with my heart pounding and my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Part of me was sure there was a reasonable explanation, that I was overreacting, that Elena would open the door with a hug and a laugh and clear everything up. But when my key didn't work, and I looked through that window and saw my sister treating my house like it belonged to her, all those hopes shattered into a million pieces. I knocked, pounded actually, hard enough that my knuckles hurt. Elena opened the door with an annoyed expression that shifted to shock when she saw me. "Zoe, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? This is my house, Elena. Why don't my keys work?" She blocked the doorway with her body. Behind her, I could see Marco and 2 people I didn't recognize sitting at my table. "You should have called first. This isn't a good time." "Called first to enter my own property?" My voice was rising and I didn't care. "Who are those people? What have you done to my house?" "Look, things have changed," Elena said, crossing her arms. "We've been living here for 3 years. We put money into this place, made improvements. You can't just show up and expect us to drop everything." I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. "Elena, you signed an agreement. You're supposed to leave within 30 days of my return. I'm back, so you need to start packing." She laughed, actually laughed. "That agreement? Zoe, come on, we're family. You're not seriously going to hold us to some piece of paper? Besides, we've established residency here. We have rights." "Rights?" The word came out as a whisper. "This is my house. I own it. You're here because I allowed it." "You allowed it for 3 years," Marco said, appearing behind Elena. "That means something legally." Maybe you should have thought about that before abandoning your property. Abandoning my property. I felt like I'd been punched. I was working, building my career. You knew that. You agreed to this arrangement. Well, the arrangement has changed, Elena said flatly. We're not leaving. We've made this our home. The kids are enrolled in school here. Marco finally has a good job. You can't just uproot us because you decided to come back. I decided to come back? This was always temporary. Then you should have come back sooner. Elena started closing the door. I think you should leave, Zoe. Come back when you're ready to have a reasonable conversation about all of this. Maybe we can work something out. The door shut in my face. I stood there on my own doorstep, locked out of my own home, while my sister and her family occupied the space I'd spent years working to afford. I looked through the window again and saw one of the strangers, a woman with bleached hair, pouring herself coffee from my espresso machine. She saw me staring and had the audacity to wave before pulling the curtains closed. I got back in my rental car and just drove. I didn't know where I was going. I ended up at a beach parking lot where I sat with my head against the steering wheel and cried harder than I had since my mother died. Not just because I'd been betrayed, but because I'd been betrayed by the person I'd sacrificed everything for, the person I'd loved unconditionally, the person I'd trusted with the most valuable thing I owned. When the tears finally stopped, something else took their place, something cold and focused and absolutely certain. If Elena wanted to use the law against me, then I'd use the law right back, and I wouldn't stop until I had my house, my life, and my justice. I checked into a hotel and spent that entire night researching California tenant and property laws. By morning, I'd contacted 3 different real estate attorneys. By afternoon, I'd hired the best one, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd built her reputation on winning impossible cases. This is going to be complicated, Patricia told me during our first meeting. If they've established residency and they're claiming they've made improvements to the property, they can make this difficult. But the agreement you had them sign is solid, and the fact that it was always explicitly temporary works in your favor. How long will this take? I asked. If they fight it, could be 6 months to a year. A year of my sister living in my house, of me paying for hotel rooms while she enjoyed the ocean view I'd earned. The injustice of it made me want to scream. Then we fight, I said. Whatever it takes. Patricia filed an unlawful detainer lawsuit that same week. Elena and Marco were served with eviction papers, and according to the process server, Elena had torn them up in front of him and slammed the door. But legal papers don't disappear just because you destroy them. The first hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I showed up in a tailored suit with a folder full of documents, the original purchase records, the caretaker agreement, bank statements showing I'd paid every mortgage payment, insurance records, everything that proved my ownership was absolute and their presence was conditional. Elena showed up in jeans and a t-shirt without a lawyer, looking defiant. The judge reviewed the documents and asked Elena if she had legal representation. She said she didn't need a lawyer because this is family business, not a real legal matter. I watched the judge's expression harden. Ms. Reyes, he said, looking at Elena, this is very much a legal matter. Your sister owns this property. You signed an agreement acknowledging temporary residency in exchange for caretaking. That agreement has clear terms for vacation. Do you dispute any of these facts? I dispute that she can just throw us out on the street, Elena said. We've lived there for 3 years. Our kids go to school there. We've made that house a home. A home you were allowed to occupy under specific conditions, the judge replied. Conditions you agreed to, unless you can provide evidence that the property ownership has somehow transferred to you, or that the original agreement was made under duress or fraud. I don't see grounds for your continued residency. What about squatters' rights? Marco interjected. The judge looked at him with barely concealed irritation. This isn't a case of adverse possession. You had permission to be there, permission that came with an expiration date. The judge ruled in my favor, giving Elena and Marco 30 days to vacate the property and return it in the conditions specified in the original agreement. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow, because as we left the courtroom, Elena grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and hissed, "You're really going to do this? Kick your own sister out? After everything I've done for you?" Everything she'd done for me? The reversal was so absurd, I almost laughed. "What have you done for me, Elena, besides take advantage of every opportunity I gave you? I took care of you when Mom died. I was there for you. You were 17 when Mom died. I took care of you. I paid for your education, your wedding. I gave you a place to live when you needed it. And this is how you repay me?" She released my arm and stepped back, her face twisting into something ugly. "You know what your problem is, Zoe? You think your money makes you better than everyone else. You think because you have a career and a fancy house that you're somehow superior. But you're not. You're just selfish. You always have been." The words were designed to hurt, but they bounced off the armor I'd been building over the past few weeks. If helping you for 20 years is selfish, then I'll own that label. 30 days, Elena. The judge was clear. I walked away, and I didn't look back. 30 days came and went. Elena and Marco didn't leave. They didn't even pack. Patricia filed for enforcement of the court order. The sheriff's department scheduled a lockout for the following week. On the day before the scheduled lockout, I got a call from my homeowners association. There'd been a complaint about my property. Apparently, someone had spray-painted graffiti all over the back wall facing the garden. I drove over and had to park on the street because there were 3 cars in my driveway, none of which I recognized. The spray paint was real. Obscene words and crude images covered the pristine white wall I'd had professionally finished. It would cost thousands to repair. But that wasn't the worst of it. I walked around to the front, and through the windows I could see my house had been trashed. Furniture was broken, walls had holes in them. The custom light fixture I'd imported from Spain was shattered on the floor. They were destroying my house out of spite. I called Patricia immediately, sending her photos. She called the sheriff's department and had the lockout moved up to the next morning with a police escort due to suspected property destruction. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept imagining what else Elena might do before they were forced out. I thought about gasoline and matches, about sledgehammers and plumbing, about all the ways someone could destroy something out of pure malice. The next morning, I met Patricia and 2 sheriff's deputies at my house at 8 a.m. Elena must have been watching because she opened the door before we could knock. "You're really doing this," she said. Not a question. A statement of disbelief. "You had 30 days. You were given every opportunity to leave with dignity. You chose this." The deputies entered the house and formally informed Elena and Marco they had to leave immediately. They could take their personal belongings, but the property now needed to be vacated. The next 2 hours were a blur. Elena screamed, Marco argued, the kids cried. The 2 strangers I'd seen that first day, apparently Marco's brother and his girlfriend, who'd been living in my converted garage, threw insults as they packed. Neighbors came out to watch the spectacle. Through it all, I stood in my driveway with my arms crossed and my expression neutral, refusing to give Elena the satisfaction of seeing me react. As the last of their belongings were carried out, Elena stopped in front of me. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy from crying. For just a moment I saw my little sister again, the one I'd protected and provided for, the one I'd loved. "I'll never forgive you for this," she said quietly. "I know," I replied, "and I'll never forgive you for what you did." She walked away, and the deputies changed my locks. When I finally entered my house, truly entered it, knowing I had every right to be there, the relief was immediately overtaken by rage. They destroyed so much. The Italian sofa had knife slashes across the cushions. Every mirror was broken. The kitchen cabinets had been pulled off the walls. It looked like a hurricane had torn through. Patricia put her hand on my shoulder. Document everything. Take photos of every single bit of damage. We're going to sue them for all of it. I spent the next week cataloging the destruction. The repairs would cost over $40,000. The custom fixtures that couldn't be replaced were losses I could never recover. But beyond the financial damage, there was something deeper. The violation of knowing that someone I loved had intentionally tried to hurt me as deeply as possible. Still, I had my house back. That was what mattered. I filed a civil lawsuit against Elena and Marco for property damage, seeking compensation for repairs, plus the legal fees I'd incurred fighting to reclaim my own home. They didn't show up to court, and I won a default judgment. Not that it meant much. They'd declared bankruptcy within weeks of being evicted, probably to avoid having to pay me. The judgment was essentially worthless paper. But I wasn't done. I hired contractors and spent 2 months personally overseeing every repair. I didn't just restore my house. I made it better. New furniture, upgraded appliances, a completely redesigned garden that rose like a phoenix from the ashes of Elena's spite. And then I did something Elena would never have expected because she'd never understood who I really was underneath all those years of sacrifice. I succeeded, spectacularly. I took a new position as vice president of acquisitions for a major international real estate firm, negotiated a contract that included equity, and over the next year closed deals that made me genuinely wealthy. Not just comfortable, wealthy. The kind of wealth where I didn't have to think about money anymore. I bought a second property, a penthouse in downtown LA with panoramic city views. I took the vacations I denied myself for years. I invested in art. I ate at restaurants I'd only read about. I lived the life I'd always deserved, but had been too busy sacrificing for others to claim. And I documented all of it on social media. Not out of vanity, but as a statement. A declaration that her betrayal hadn't broken me. That I'd risen above what she'd done and built something even better. Every photo of my restored mansion, every vacation post, every achievement at work was proof that I hadn't just survived. I'd thrived. Elena followed my accounts, of course. I could see her viewing my stories. I never blocked her. I wanted her to see exactly what her betrayal had cost her. Not my destruction, but my triumph. 6 months after the eviction, I got a message from her. A long, rambling paragraph about how hard things had been, how they'd struggled to find a place to live, how the kids were having trouble adjusting to their new school in a less desirable area. She didn't apologize, not once. Instead, she asked if I could help them with first and last month's rent on a better apartment. I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond with rage, to list every betrayal, every lie, every moment of entitlement that had led us here. Part of me wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her audacity. Instead, I sent back 3 sentences. You made your choices. I've made mine. I wish you well, but I can't help you. Then I blocked her on every platform. The truth is, the revenge I'd imagined, dramatic, confrontational, satisfying in that immediate, visceral way, wasn't what I actually needed. What I needed was to reclaim what was mine, to rebuild, and then to move forward without the weight of her presence in my life. The real victory wasn't in seeing her suffer. It was in realizing I didn't need her to suffer for me to be happy. A year after reclaiming my house, I met someone. David was a marine biologist who worked at the Aquarium of the Pacific, someone who'd built his life around passion rather than money, who understood that the most valuable things couldn't be bought. We met at a fundraiser, bonded over shared views on conservation, and fell into something that felt nothing like the relationships I'd prioritized beneath family and career for so long. The first time I brought him to my house, I told him the whole story. I expected judgment, maybe questions about whether I'd been too harsh, whether family should have meant more than property rights. Instead, He looked around at what I'd built and rebuilt and said, "You protected yourself. That's not selfish. That's necessary. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve access to what you've created." We were married 18 months later, on the deck of my house, with the Pacific stretching out behind us and 50 friends bearing witness. Elena wasn't invited. I'd grieved that loss, worked through it with a therapist, and made peace with the fact that not all family deserves a place in your life. During the reception, David's mother pulled me aside. "He told me what you went through," she said, "what your sister did. And I want you to know, you're part of our family now. And in our family, we protect each other. We don't exploit each other." I cried then, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally belonging somewhere safe. 2 years after reclaiming my house, I got word through a mutual acquaintance that Elena and Marco had divorced. Marco had apparently been having an affair with the bleached blonde woman who'd been living in my garage. Elena was living in a one-bedroom apartment with her 3 kids, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and telling anyone who'd listen that I'd destroyed her life. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not sympathy, just the quiet neutrality of being truly done. I'd learned something crucial through everything that happened. You can't save people who refuse to save themselves. You can't love people into being worthy of that love. And you can't sacrifice yourself to the point of destruction and call it virtue. Some people will see your kindness as weakness, your generosity as obligation, your love as something to be exploited until there's nothing left to take. And when those people show you who they really are, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to seek revenge. It's to rebuild your life so completely, so successfully, so beautifully that their absence becomes irrelevant. I stand on my deck now, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson, and I think about the woman I was when I first bought this house. Hopeful, optimistic, still believing that sacrifice and love were enough to keep family together. She was naive, but she wasn't wrong to dream. I'm different now, harder in some ways, softer in others. I know the difference between generosity and self-destruction, between family and people who share your blood, between forgiveness and allowing yourself to be victimized repeatedly. My house stands beautiful and whole, a testament not just to survival, but to the radical act of refusing to let someone else's betrayal define your story. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's the life you build after someone tries to destroy you.